First of all, to all those out there who say that no one will be harmed by Fukushima. It is the biggest lie ever told. I went into central Pennsylvania. It was nice to see Eric up there in the year after the accident at 3 Mile Island, and I interviewed dozens of people. It was the worst time I ever spent in my life. Cancer, leukemia, birth defects, stillbirths, malformations, open sores, loss of hair, metallic taste in the mouth, animals that couldn't breed. It was like being in a science fiction film, a very bad science fiction film. And yet the industry still persists in saying that no one was killed at 3 Mile Island. It's a horrible lie. They say not enough radiation escaped from 3 Mile Island to harm anybody. They don't know how much radiation escaped. They will never know how much radiation escaped. All the monitors went off scale during 3 Mile Island. They had a thermoluminescent dosimeters which measure radiation where it goes, and there was one that went off scale exactly where it was expected in the northwest quadrant where the wind was blowing, and the industry said it was a defective monitor and it didn't mean anything. That's what the industry does. If you push a button and they have a major disaster, the instant response is always the same. Not enough radiation escaped to harm anybody. That's what they said about Chernobyl. That's what they're saying about Fukushima. And that's what they'll say about the next accident and the accident after that. And WIPP as well.
It's very unnerving for folks when we talk in units of radiation and millirem, and you don't understand it and you're not used to it. I'm going to give an analogy, and it's not a scientific analogy, but it might help you. I would never work on 13.8 kilovolts of electricity because I'm not trained in electricity kills. If you look at industrial safety accidents, driving your vehicle and electricity are two of the highest causes of death in industry and to the general public. I would never work on 13.8 kVs. But I charge my iPhone every single night. I charge my iPad every single night. I touch that cord, I move that cord, I don't feel a tingle, I don't feel a shock. And if I licked that cord, it wouldn't hurt me. There are levels of radiation that will kill you. There are levels of radiation that we know will cause cancer. These levels of radiation are just above natural background at the WIPP site. And so there is no expectation that those measurements for you or your children or anyone else will show exposure on a lung count. They're down in the levels of licking your iPhone charger. And I'm not trying to be funny, I'm trying to...
Let me give you a quick history here, starting with Hiroshima and Nagasaki. When they bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the military said that when people started losing their hair and all the other horrible things that happened, the military said, well, there's no such thing as radiation. What are you talking about? And then they had to fess up that there was radiation in it, which the scientists knew, of course. The scientists who made the atomic bomb circulated a petition. 80% of the scientists in the Manhattan Project asked the military to drop the bombs in uninhabited areas so that they would demonstrate to the Japanese what we have but not kill all these people. But of course, the military went ahead and did that. They bombed Hiroshima and Nagasaki, by the way, because those were two of the 4 cities we deliberately did not bomb so they could test the impact of the bombs with aerial photographs. To this day, the tests and the bombings in Hiroshima and Nagasaki are referred to as announced nuclear tests. And they denied that anybody would have any health effects at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Then they denied that there would be any health effects from the bombings in the South Pacific, the atomic tests that were conducted in the Marshall Islands, especially at Bikini. This is the 60th anniversary, March 1st, 1954, the Castle Bravo test. They blew up Bikini. It went off twice as powerful as they thought. The wind shifted direction, and an unfortunate ship, the Lucky Dragon, was completely contaminated. 6 of the 23 crew members eventually died of liver cancer. And the chief of the Atomic Energy Commission, Louis Strauss, accused them of being communists and trying to make the Americans look bad because they went and died of liver cancer. That's a communist plot. Louis Strauss is the same guy that said nuclear power will be too cheap to meter. Then, and this is the killer, and this is the one thing you need to always remember when you're debating someone from the nuclear industry. In 1956, Dr. Alice Stewart, who was not looking for anything resembling radiation, found in a survey she was doing that women who are X-rayed during pregnancy, their offspring will have a doubled childhood leukemia rate. Now she was attacked, she was crucified, she was pilloried, she was blacklisted, you name it, for 30 years. Now, I met Dr. Stewart. She was didn't mess with Alice Stewart. She was an amazing woman. She stood her ground. And then after 30 years in the 1980s, the medical profession finally said, well, maybe we shouldn't really X-ray pregnant women anymore. And maybe when you go have a dental X-ray, you might want to put on a bib. And maybe X-ray technicians should leave the room when they do this day after day after day. The bottom line is there is no safe dose of radiation. There is no dose of radiation that can be shown that it will not harm an embryo or a fetus in utero. There's no such thing. There's no number. And this has been proven time and time again. So when you have these people running around saying, Fukushima is the equivalent of eating a banana, we've seen that in this ridiculous movie, Pandora's Promise. It's the equivalent of eating banana. It's like flying from New York to Los Angeles. It's like living in Denver. It's utter nonsense. Radiation kills people. Many, many, many people will die as a result of Fukushima. There is absolutely no doubt about it.
That is how I began to realize that our government was not telling us the truth about the seriousness of low-level radiation exposures. Because at the same time, in 1960, 61, I found out about a paper by Dr. Alice Stewart in England that was reported at congressional hearings about the need for bomb shelters. And in that paper, it showed that when a woman receives just a couple of X-rays during pregnancy to find out the position of the baby or the size of the opening, the canal through which the baby has emerged, it turns out that she found that women who had received X-rays during pregnancy had twice the risk of developing cancer in their children, that the children before age 10 developed leukemia and cancer at twice the rate than a control group of women who had the same background and same history, same age and everything. And so we knew all of a sudden that very much less radiation is needed to damage the infant in utero. Because for many decades, since the beginning of the century, 1895, when X-rays were discovered, we had always taken diagnostic X-rays, chest X-rays, dental X-rays for granted. In fact, I remember as a young boy walking into shoe stores and watching my toes through the shoes, wiggling my toes. And so my father was a dermatologist and talked to my mother, who was a gynecologist and pediatrician, about the danger of X-rays, that he had to repair skin cancer that had been produced by other doctors using X-rays to treat acne. And all these mistakes in the early years of medicine led to our beginning of our understanding that radiation is both a benefit and a source of great concern if it's misused.
The next issue that was raised by the critique was the special vulnerability of the embryo to radiation, and that it was not taken into account.
Yeah, this is an issue that's very important to me as a pediatrician. Human beings don't react to radioactivity the same way. Radioactivity has stochastic effects. That means that it's not about determining a certain dose or a certain amount of radioactivity that is harmful and everything below that is safe. It's not like that. It's actually similar to when you're talking about smoking. You can't say 2 cigarettes is fine and 3 cigarettes will kill you. It's all about chances that you take. And the more you smoke or the more contact you have to radioactive exposure, the higher your chances of actually getting a disease or getting cancer. And obviously this is, like in smoking, very dependent on your own genetic background, on your own immune system. So obviously someone who has a very good immune system, who is rather good at repairing cell defects from radiation or other toxins, will have a lower chance of actually catching cancer, for example, after being exposed to radiation. So there's people out there, for example, people with immune defects, people who take medication that reduces their immune functions, and children whose immune systems aren't fully developed yet, who have a much higher vulnerability towards radioactive effects. And this is not taken into consideration, especially the unborn child, which is the most vulnerable to radioactivity. We know that from research that goes back into the 1950s. An adult can very well take an X-ray of the chest without developing cancer afterwards. But we know that an unborn child in a woman's womb is so vulnerable to radioactivity or to ionizing radiation that in fact even small amounts of radiation, like from a normal X-ray, can actually increase the chances of a child getting cancer by very substantial degrees. So one single X-ray to the abdomen of a pregnant woman would increase the chance of getting cancer within childhood by 50%. And this is just one X-ray, and we're talking about much higher doses in Fukushima. So by saying that all people are alike and all children are alike and there's no difference between an unborn child or a child of 5 years old, this radiobiologic knowledge that we've accumulated over several decades is just completely discounted in the UNSCARE report, and they're acting like we wouldn't know that children, and especially unborn children, have a much higher vulnerability. So that's a point that I, especially as a pediatrician, feel very strongly about, that needs to be corrected. It cannot be that we base all our recommendations regarding radiation dose levels on healthy adults, healthy male adults, instead of actually on the most vulnerable population, which is the unborn child.
After Chernobyl we finally hear all kinds of cancer went up the next year. Hard to interpret, says OPCS. Can't understand it, well here is a guess. Low-level isotopes from the Ukraine drifted to Wales on the wind and the rain. Rainfall is higher in Bangor than Kent. Cancer in Wales is up 30%. We're breathing strontium, locking it into the structure of cellular DNA. And each beat a decay in an occasional, rather mutational way. Kills us. Even new Labour can see what it means. Radioisotopes alter your genes. Ghosts of dead babies will give them no rest till the dosimetry's been reassessed. Wombling, strombling, Bangor to Kent, telling the news of the second event. Telling the story all unto scenes. How radioisotopes alter your genes. Nuclear establishment, castle of lies. Children are dying in front of your eyes. Born with no limbs, with 2 heads or no brain. Born to a life of incurable pain. Nuclear subsidies victims will pay, while you take a pension and tiptoe away. Don't reassure us, 'cause we always knew yours was a story too slick to be true. We're breathing strontium, locking it into the structure of cellular DNA. And each beat a decay in an occasional, rather mutational way. Kills us. Nobody's hiding these nuclear crooks. Government stooges aren't cooking the books. Only the mothers are guilty of crimes, bearing their children in nuclear times. Radioisotopes float around free, up in the atmosphere, up near the sea. So many diseases genetically linked. Strontium bombs will soon be extinct, 'cause we're breathing strontium, locking it into the structure of cellular DNA, and each should be to decay in an occasional, rather mutational way.